Hello everyone. So this is lecture 4 on functions. So today our outline, we're going to start out talking about an introduction to functions, just a really quick background into what functions are, what they're useful for, how to think about them. And then I'll briefly review functions in Excel, and then I'll talk about functions in Python. And then there are two examples that go with today's lecture. One that dives deep into Excel and how to use functions there, and one that dives deep into functions in Python and does a bunch of examples. Okay, so let's get right into it. So what is a function? So at its most basic, a function is a map between an input and an output. Okay, so if I have, just some box here, I'm going to call this my function. All right, and some stuff comes in, and what that function does is it turns it into something else coming out. All right, so you can think of a function in a couple different ways. So this is kind of the generic way. So one way you can think of a function is as a formula. So a function, or maybe I'll put it differently, some functions can be written as a formula. Okay, so that's one type of function. So if I have, in math, we would write that x transforms into some f of x, where this is what comes in and this is what comes out. So for example, we have x becomes x squared, right? So that's f of x is equal to x squared. So you put in a number 3 and out comes 9, right? So if you think you have a box, a 3 goes in, you've got your box here, stuff happens, okay, out comes 9. So some functions can be written as a formula. Another way to think about a function is to think about them as a procedure. So some functions can be thought of as a procedure. All right? So in this case, you're thinking maybe I've got CBA, this string of characters that comes together, and out of CBA comes ABC. So maybe this is an alphabetization box, right? So again, I have my box over here. I have CBA. Okay, goes into the box. Stuff happens. Magic happens here. Out comes ABC. All right. So, and you might think, well, what would this procedure look like? Well, here it's kind of obvious. It's a formula, or a formula is kind of obvious. You do math. For procedure, you might have to write down a list of steps. So this might, you might say step through each letter in the list. Oh, terrible writing. In the list. Compare pairs of letters. Okay. Swap pairs to the correct order. Okay. And then cycle through list. Through list until sorted. Okay, so in this case, you might imagine you go through, you compare B and C, you say those need to flip. You compare A and B, you say those need to flip. So the first time through you would get B, C, or let's see, B, C, A, you would after the first one, and then you would get B, A, C after the second one, and then you'd have to loop through again, and then the last time you'd get A, B, C, and that would be fine. And then you go, oh, this is the right order, so I'm fine. Okay, this is actually has a name. This is called the bubble sort. You don't need to know this. That's just an algorithm, okay? But that you could write a function that does that. All right. So if you can have it as a formula or as a procedure, you can actually think about a function. So maybe the natural thing for a chemical engineer is to think about a function as a formula. You think, I put in a number, another number comes out. And this procedure might be a little odd to you to think of it that way. But it turns out that if you can think about it as a procedure, you can now think of these sort of boxes as maybe two more ways to think about it is as an abstraction. Okay, and an abstraction is just a black box you can forget about. Okay, so notice here this is a sort, right? So I take this in and I take this out, and so you can now think about a function as doing something, right? It's some object. It's abstracted. It's not, you don't have to think about all the details of all these steps anymore. You can just think of it as a sorting algorithm. Okay? So, and if you can think of it like that, if you can abstract from that, then you can use this to organize, name, okay, and reuse code. Okay, so imagine that you wanted to do this sort, right? Now if you have the sort box, okay, you can write the sort in one part of your code, right? So you write in one part, okay, and then execute in another. And, oh my goodness, another. Okay, so you can say, I want to take CBA and I want to sort, and I get out ABC. You might also, I'm going to scroll so I don't get in the way of my head. You might also take FED and sort. Okay, and now you get out DEF. Okay, so now you can reuse that sort again and again on different inputs and outputs. You can give it a name. You call it the sort function. All right, and you can organize your code in this way so that you've got parts where you're writing that and parts where you're using it. Okay, so that part's over here. All right, so that's really the introduction to functions. So to sort of summarize what we said as I scroll back up here, I said a function is a map. It takes an input and turns it into an output. You can think of that map, maybe in math terms as, a formula, something you write down like x squared, but it's even more general than that. It's just any procedure that you write down. And once you start thinking about it like a procedure, you can abstract from that. Your code can now be a way to organize something and a way to reuse your code. And that becomes really useful. Okay, so let's talk about how this plays out in our two numerical tools. All right, so now let's do functions in Excel. Okay, so Excel, the key thing to know about Excel is that it has many built-in functions. Okay, these are in Excel, they're called formulas, I think. Isn't that what they're called? Formulas? But you can't write your own. Oops. Okay, and I'm going to put a star by you can't write your own. Okay, and I'm going to say kind of. Okay, so you can actually write your own, but not easily. You have to do programming to write your own. So I'm going to put C last day of class. Okay, so for now you can't write your own. Okay, last day of class, we'll take that away and we'll show you that you can kind of. Okay, so in Excel, these formulas, what happens is you have your cell, right? If this is your cell, and you say equals sign of something. Okay? Now this is the name of the function. Name of function. Okay? And this is what's called the argument. All right? So notice that in Excel, here, what goes in parentheses, what's in the argument, this is the in of the box, right? So you have argument goes into the function. I'm going to use fn for function, okay? And then what comes out is the result, okay? And so if you put in, pi thirds here, the argument would be pi thirds. The function is sine, all right? And the result is whatever sine of pi thirds is. I think we said last time, did we say it was root 3 over 2? I can never remember. Now I'm going to get made fun of. Okay? So the result in Excel, right, you type that in, but the result then shows up in the box. Okay? So after you type this in, you hit enter. Okay, you hit enter, and out pops the result, root 3 over 2. Okay? And it's not going to actually show you root 3 over 2. It's going to be like 0.866, whatever root 3 over 2 is. Okay, it's not going to show you that. It's going to show you that decimal point. All right? So that's how you call a function. And Excel has lots of functions that you can call, that you can use. Notice that I'm saying the word call a function. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. What I mean by call a function is when I use it. That's synonymous for use, okay? Or cause to be executed. Okay, hopefully some of these terms will get a little, sorry, I covered that up a little bit. Okay, hopefully this will make a little more sense. So let's just take a glance down in Excel. I have a whole set of examples for you in another video, but let's just take a quick look. So the first thing you notice is that there is documentation of all the functions that are in Excel. And there are many, many, many functions. Okay, so they have, look at the 10 most popular. They've got date, they've got lookup functions, if, sums, etc. Okay, they've got financial functions. Maybe you want to calculate what your mortgage is. All right, they've got all sorts of present value, net present value, that kind of stuff in here. Okay, tons of functions. I'll put a link in the video description so you can follow up on the documentation. Okay, and just like I said, let's zoom in a little bit here. Oh my goodness. Did Excel freeze on me? What is going on? Oh, there it goes. Okay, caught up. So notice if I do this, sine of, man, it is being slow. Sine of pi divided by 3. It's taking a while to catch up. Pi thirds, okay? It does. It gives me 0.86603, right? Just like I said, right? So that is functions in Excel. Let's see. Let me just make sure I didn't forget anything. Functions in Excel. I think that's it. Okay. So the last section is let's talk really quick about functions in Python. So this is 3 functions in Python. All right, and again, I want to say I have a big example video. It's probably 20 minutes long. It goes through a ton of examples of using functions in Python. This is just a quick intro, the background material that you need to know. Okay, so in Python, okay, so if we think about our summary up here, we said Excel has many built-in functions. You cannot write your own. Python. So Python has few built-in functions. Okay, but then it has two other things. So Python has many libraries of functions. And when I say many, I mean many libraries. Okay, and then you can write your own. Okay, So let's talk about, so if you can write your own, there's two things that you need to be able to do. Okay? On the one hand, you need to be able to use a function. Okay? Or I said call a function. Okay? The other one is you need to be able to write your own function, and that would be define a function. Okay? So there's two different things that you need to be able to do. So you can use a function, all right, you can use one that's built in. You can use one from a library. Okay, these libraries in Python are called modules. Okay, that's their name. Okay, so you can use one from a library or a module. Okay, or you can use one that you wrote. Okay, any function that you can access from these, all right, you're going to call that function. Or you can define your own function. All right, so let's talk about this first. Let's talk about that first, then we'll talk about defining a function next. So how do you use a function? So you use a function pretty similarly to how you use a function in Excel. So in Excel, remember you have you have one of these cells, all right? You don't have a cell in Python, you just have a line of code, right? So if this is your line, maybe up here you defined a variable, 3 is y, all right? Now you want to print that variable. Print is a function. It's a built-in function. You can print y. All right? This is the argument. It is the thing that goes in. So what I have is y is going in to my print function. Okay? And now what comes out is the character y in the console. Okay? So that's going to send that out to the screen, okay, to the console, and print it out. Okay? So this is the name of the function right here. Okay? Suppose maybe this isn't the best example. Suppose that I wanted to do the same example I had before in Excel, where I have this guy. Suppose I want to make x assigned to sine of pi thirds, okay? Pi divided by 3. All right? So now in Python, we're going to have to be a little bit careful because it turns out that sine is not defined and pi is not defined. So we need to use a module. The way we do that is by importing it. We use the import command, and we're going to import math. This will give us this library. It's a math library, okay, or a math module, right? Oh, my head's covering that up. Sorry about that. Okay, so instead of writing this guy, okay, that's not going to work, right? This won't work. What we need to do is instead put import math, and then down here we'll put x is equal to math.sine of math.pi divided by 3. Now that will work. Okay, that's happy face. So we need to use the math. So notice here, again, this is the argument. Okay, this is the function name. All right, and here's the output. So in our little diagram, if I give myself a little space maybe, right, my input is math.pi over 3 comes in. Then I have math.sine here. And what comes out is x. All right? So this is calling a function. That's what we're doing here. This is calling a function. So this is, I'm going to put that up here in 1. This is calling a function. For some reason, I haven't figured out, maybe you can help me understand. Maybe someone can write me an email and tell me. But the concept of calling a function seems to be confusing for students who are learning programming for the first time. All right. So let me just say one more thing real quick about calling a function before I forget. So there are many different libraries that you can import. So here is the documentation for Python. And this is a list of all the built-in functions. You can see it's actually quite small. So print is right here. Okay, there's a couple others maybe that you've used in the last little bit. Maybe you learned about integers or strings and data types, and we talked about those kinds of things in variables. There are other libraries. So one of the other libraries we're going to learn is the NumPy module, numerical Python. All right. Another one is the math library. And so if you come over here to the NumPy documentation, you can see all of the tons of math functions that they have. All right. So, here they have, I saw as we were scrolling, hyperbolic sine. All right. So even though Python has relatively few built-in functions, it's extremely extensible, and people have written these other modules to be able to do extra things. Okay. So the modules that exist, I can't even enumerate them all, but there is the math module. There is what I said before. Let me do capital NumPy, okay, which is numerical Python. Okay, we're going to use SciPy, which is scientific Python. All right. Let's see. There is also one we're going to use a lot, Matplotlib, okay, which is a plotting library. Okay. And let's see if I wrote anyone. Let's see. There is a CSV library. Okay, we're going to use this for text input and output. Okay, so these are all just examples of modules. Okay, we're going to use like this one and this one and this one. We're going to use all the time, right? We're going to get to know those a little bit, and we're going to use those all the time, right? So and again, you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to at the beginning of your code import them if you want to be able to use them. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about here in Python is let's talk about number 2 up here. If I scroll up, we were on Python, I said we could call a function, but what about defining a function? How do we do that? Okay, so if we want to write our own function, how do we do that? So let's put that here. Let's put 2, define a function. Okay. And to define a function, you use a keyword called def, which is short for define. Okay, def my function. Okay, it has to be all one one connected string. So I put an underscore there. Okay, argument 1, argument 2. Let's say that. Okay, so you def the name of the function, parentheses, and you put the arguments in there, and you put a colon. Okay, and then down here you put your code, okay, or maybe I'll say differently. You put your formula or procedure. All right, so I'll show an example in just a second. All right, and then you return output. Okay, no period. All right, so if we think about our box, let's draw our box again. So now in here, I'm going to make it a little bigger. All right. I've got my function right here. That's the name of it right there. And the code or procedure, that's what's written inside there, right? So that's formula or procedure. All right. And argument 1, argument 2, they're my inputs. All right, and then output, that's what comes out. All right, so let me grab a new page up here. So let me just write a quick example. So you would maybe say def squared. And you would let x be my input. And then down here, I would put y is assigned to x squared, and I would return y. All right, so this is my function definition. All right, and then now if I have a code, Suppose those are my 3 lines. If I go to run this code, this doesn't do anything. It's just defining the function. It's not actually going to run it, right? This is a way of creating an abstract separate region for a squared function, all right? So now I need to call my function. So if I wanted to say z is assigned to squared of 5, what's going to happen? Now if I had given myself this call, this is where I call the function. Now 5 gets substituted into code that runs like this. So now 5 will get, you can think of it as getting plugged into this. So 5 gets substituted for x. X then gets squared, made into 25, which gets assigned to a variable y. And y then gets returned, which then gets pushed back into z. So this then pushes z, if I were to print z, that would produce 25. Okay, but I could call it again. I could now say, let me make a is equal to squared of 7. And now 7 will get pushed in, squared, 49, and returned. And now a, if I print it, will be, of course, 49. Okay? So the function definition doesn't mean that this happens, right? This variable here, all right, this variable is just a dummy. Okay, it doesn't exist outside of the function. It just exists here. This is also a dummy function, or a dummy variable. Excuse me. Okay, it stays with that function inside there. All right, and so there's this important concept then that comes with functions of what are called local variables and global variables. Okay, a local variable is one that's only good inside the function. Okay, it's only known, maybe is a better word, inside a function. A global variable is one that's known everywhere. Okay, I think I use this analogy in another one of my videos. But think of a local variable as like a local policeman. This is the BYU police. Okay? If you tried to go up to the University of Utah and give them a ticket with your BYU police, the policeman give them a ticket, they'd say, no way, that's not valid here. I don't care. All right? But a global variable, that's like the FBI. Their jurisdiction is everywhere, right? For the whole United States. So if you go up to the University of Utah with it, and the FBI has a warrant, boom, right? Then that's valid. Okay? So a local variable is like these guys right here. X and Y, they're local variables. They're only good inside the squared function. Z here, okay, that's global. I don't define that anywhere in here, so it's recognized everywhere. It's not defined inside the function, okay? So local variables are only good inside a function, and they are defined inside a function. Okay? There's other places that we can talk about local variables and classes and other things, but we don't really get into that in this class. Okay? All right. So I think that's what I had to say about functions. That's the gist of the concept. I hope it was not too confusing. I hope this is clear. So the key takeaway for Python is that there are two things you can do. You can use functions, and you can use functions that are built in, or they're in libraries, or that you wrote, and you can define a function. And you have to be able to do both of these things. But it's really powerful in programming because you can define a function. In Excel, you're stuck using only the functions that are already defined. Okay? So that's all I have for you. I wish you the best and happy programming.